There's growing speculation that the European Commission will introduce legislation for European secured notes, or ESNs, in the near future. As it has the potential to grow into a new asset class, it's worth taking a few minutes to understand this idea and its implications. But first, what is an ESN?
A European secured note uses covered bond technology to fund assets not normally found in cover pools. We've always known that covered bonds are highly recession-proof, but we may have overestimated how much this was because they can only be backed by really safe assets like residential mortgages and public sector loans. Covered bonds perform really well in countries where a housing market took a bad hit, like Ireland and Greece. And the market started to think that if the resilience of covered bonds comes from their structure as much as from their assets, then maybe this structure could be used to fund less safe assets.
It seems like an obvious idea. Has anything like this been tried before?
A little. In Turkey, loans to small and medium-sized businesses are an allowed asset class under the covered bond law, and in Germany, Commerzbank used contract law to create a similar bond. Then there are similar concepts, like a bank using its own securitizations as collateral, usually in repo operations with a central bank. In essence, this is a dual recourse instrument. The central bank has recourse to the borrower in the repo, and if the borrower fails, they have recourse to the underlying assets in the securitization. But the real reason that ESNs haven't taken off before now is that funding conditions for banks have been very good. The ECB's purchase programme and the long-term repo operations have made it easy for most banks to borrow what they need without having to develop new funding instruments. But this is beginning to change.
Covered bonds are mainly backed by mortgages and public sector loans. What assets are likely to back ESNs?
So far, the European Commission and industry have concentrated on the possible use of loans to small and medium-sized enterprises and infrastructure project finance. But some people have argued that it is up to the market and individual member states to decide the eligible asset classes. That might be difficult. The EU rules and supervisory best practices would be very vague if there wasn't an official list of eligible assets. Other people have argued that green loans should be added to the list of eligible assets. Nothing is decided yet.
There are 2.5 trillion euros of covered bonds currently outstanding. How big could the ESN market grow to become?
European banks have about 2.1 trillion euros of outstanding loans to SMEs and about 1 trillion to infrastructure projects. If they were to fund the same portion of these assets in ESNs as they fund mortgages in covered bonds, that would imply a market size of about 1.1 trillion. Now, that isn't going to happen anytime soon. Apart from anything else, traditional covered bonds are always going to be a better source of funding in terms of cost, asset encumbrance and complexity. Probably banks will only issue ESNs when they run out of capacity in the traditional covered bond market, or if there's something wrong with their mortgage assets or their covered bond law. In a study that I did on behalf of the European Commission, I developed a range of scenarios for the market's future development. The maximum potential that I saw over the next 5 years was for 20 banks to actively use this tool for a total market size of about 100 billion euros. There are a lot of assumptions behind that number.
What's the next stage in the market's development?
We know that the European Commission is keen to understand this potential market better. It adds to financial stability and it can channel funds from the capital markets to the real economy. So far, the market has been very small, but if it is to develop further as funding conditions for European banks change, it is better if it does so in a consistent way with appropriate rules and supervisory processes in place. What are those rules and supervisory processes is a discussion that industry has to have over the coming months.
If you'd like to join the debate on what the ESN market should look like and how it can develop, please come along to any of Euromoney's covered bond conferences, where it's sure to be a hot topic of discussion.